Kelveth had spent 30 years studying species across the galaxy, but humans confused him more than any other. He was a Sarathi, a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms, and his people communicated through scents and chemicals rather than words. The Sarathi collective had sent him to observe humanity, to understand why this young species held such strange power in galactic affairs. He stood at the observation window of the orbital station above Earth, watching their blue and green world spin slowly below. It was a pretty planet, he admitted. Not remarkable, but pretty. The humans had only joined the Galactic Accord 3 decades ago. They controlled just 47 star systems. Their technology was good but not exceptional. Their ships were fast but not the fastest. Their weapons were strong but not the strongest. Yet something about them made other species nervous. Kelveth had seen it himself at diplomatic meetings. When human ambassadors entered a room, conversations stopped. When human warships passed through contested space, even the most aggressive pirates moved aside. The Vreketh Dominion, which feared nothing and no one, always kept a careful distance from human territory. Why? Kelveth could not understand it. He had asked many species, but none could give him a clear answer. They would say things like, "You will see," or "It is hard to explain," and then change the subject. His main contact on the station was Commander Laura Bennett, a human woman with gray hair and calm brown eyes. She was 53 years old, which was middle-aged for humans. They did not live very long compared to most species. A Sarathi could live for 400 years. Humans rarely saw 100. Perhaps that was part of it, Kelveth thought. They lived fast because they died fast. Commander Bennett was patient with his questions. She showed him around the station, introduced him to her crew, and explained human customs. Her first officer, Lieutenant Commander Daniel Ortiz, was a younger man with dark hair and an easy smile. He laughed often and made jokes that Kelveth did not understand. The Sarathi observer spent his days documenting human behavior. He watched them eat together in large groups, talking loudly about nothing important. He watched them exercise in the gymnasium, pushing their bodies to exhaustion for no clear reason. He watched them gather in the recreation room to play games and watch entertainment programs. They were so emotional. They laughed at small things. They cried when they received news from home. They hugged each other, touched each other, stood close together in ways that made Kelveth uncomfortable. The Sarathi considered such displays primitive and inefficient. One evening, he observed a young pilot named Maria Santos receive a message that her grandmother had died. She wept openly in the corridor, and 3 other humans immediately gathered around her. They held her, spoke soft words, and stayed with her for over an hour. No work was done. No reports were filed. They simply sat with her in her grief. Kelveth recorded this in his notes as evidence of emotional weakness. A Sarathi who lost a family member would acknowledge the loss through a brief chemical ceremony and return to duties within minutes. Humans wasted so much time on feelings. He mentioned this to Commander Bennett the next day. She listened quietly, then asked him a question that he could not answer. "When one of your people dies, Kelveth, do you miss them?" The Sarathi did not have a word for miss. He tried to explain this, but Bennett just nodded slowly and said nothing more. Days passed. Kelveth continued his observations. He noted that humans formed deep bonds very quickly. Crew members who had known each other for only a few months acted like lifelong family. They remembered small details about each other, asked about each other's lives, celebrated each other's successes. It seemed inefficient. It seemed like a distraction from important work. But Kelveth could not deny that the humans worked well together. When problems arose, they solved them quickly. When mistakes were made, they forgave each other and moved on. There was a trust between them that the Sarathi did not share with each other. One night, Kelveth joined a group of officers in the recreation room. They were drinking a beverage called beer and telling stories about their past missions. Master Sergeant Roy Henderson, an older soldier with scars on his face and hands, spoke about a battle he had fought 20 years ago. "We lost half our squad that day," Henderson said. His voice was quiet but steady. "Good people. I still think about them. To the fallen, said Lieutenant Commander Ortiz, raising his glass. To the fallen, the others repeated. They drank in silence for a moment. Then someone made a joke, and they were laughing again. Kelveth watched them shift from sorrow to joy in seconds. He did not understand how they could hold both feelings at once. You seem confused, Commander Bennett said. She had appeared beside him without his notice. Your species is very strange, Kelveth admitted. You feel so much. Does it not exhaust you? Bennett smiled. It was a small, tired smile. Every day, she said. But we would not have it any other way. Before Kelveth could ask what she meant, an alarm sounded throughout the station. Red lights flashed. Crew members immediately stood and moved toward their stations with practiced speed. Emergency transmission coming in, announced a voice over the speakers. All senior officers to the command center. Kelveth followed Commander Bennett through the corridors. Around him, the atmosphere had changed completely. The laughing, joking humans were gone. In their place were focused, serious soldiers who moved with purpose and precision. In the command center, a large screen displayed a star map of the Meridian sector. 3 systems were highlighted in red. A young communications officer read the transmission aloud. The Vreketh Dominion has invaded neutral space. 3 species conquered in 7 days. Millions dead. Millions more enslaved. The Galactic Accord is calling an emergency session. Silence filled the room. Kelveth looked at the humans around him. Their faces had changed. The warmth was gone. In its place was something hard and cold. Commander Bennett stood very still, her eyes fixed on the screen. Lieutenant Commander Ortiz had stopped smiling. Even young Maria Santos, who had wept so openly just days ago, now wore an expression that Kelveth could not read. Get me a secure line to Fleet Command, Bennett said quietly, and start preparing the crew for possible deployment. Possible deployment? Kelveth asked. But the Meridian sector is far from human territory. Those species are not your allies. Why would you involve yourselves? Commander Bennett turned to look at him. Her brown eyes were no longer calm. They were something else now. Something ancient and fierce. Because someone has to, she said. Across the station, Kelveth noticed. The laughter had stopped completely. The diplomatic moon of Thessar Prime was neutral ground. No species could claim it. No weapons were allowed on its surface. For 200 years, the Galactic Accord had gathered here to settle disputes and make decisions that affected trillions of lives. Kelveth had never seen so many species in one place. The Great Assembly Chamber could hold 10,000 representatives, and today it was nearly full. 43 member species had sent delegations to discuss the Vreketh invasion. The Sarathi observer walked beside the human delegation, still recording his observations. Ambassador Catherine Lowe led the group. She was an elderly woman, perhaps 70 years old, with white hair pulled back from a lined face. She walked slowly with a cane, but her eyes were sharp and missed nothing. Behind her came Commander Bennett, Lieutenant Commander Ortiz, and several other military officers. They wore formal uniforms and carried no weapons. Their faces showed nothing. The chamber was arranged in a great circle, with each delegation seated in its designated area. Kelveth found his place among the Sarathi representatives and watched as the session began. For 2 days, species after species rose to speak. The Vreketh invasion was terrible. They agreed. The conquered peoples were suffering. They acknowledged. Something should be done. They all said, but what? The Meridian species were not members of the Galactic Accord. They had chosen to remain neutral, independent, outside the protection of the Alliance. The Vreketh Dominion had technically broken no Accord laws by attacking them. If we intervene, argued the representative from the Kasari Federation, we risk war with the Dominion. The cost would be enormous. Our own people would die for strangers who refused to join us. 1. Our own said. 1. The Vreketh are too powerful, said the ambassador from the Threll Combine. Even united, we might not defeat them. Better to strengthen our borders and protect our own. Perhaps diplomatic pressure will convince them to withdraw, suggested the Malori delegate. though he did not sound convinced. Kelveth watched Ambassador Lowe throughout these speeches. She sat quietly, taking notes on a small device. She did not react to any argument. She did not whisper to her colleagues. She simply listened. Other species noticed her silence. They whispered among themselves, wondering what the humans were planning. Were they calculating the risks? Waiting to see which way the vote would go? The humans were known for being unpredictable. On the third day, the refugees arrived. They came from the conquered worlds, survivors who had escaped the Vreketh occupation. There were only a few dozen of them, representing millions who could not flee. They were brought before the assembly to share their testimony. Kelveth had seen many disturbing things in his long life. He had witnessed wars and famines and disasters, but he was not prepared for what the refugees showed them. The footage was captured by hidden cameras, by desperate survivors, by security systems that kept recording even as their operators died. It showed Vreketh soldiers marching through cities, burning everything. It showed families torn apart, children screaming as they were loaded onto transport ships bound for labor camps. It showed mass graves being dug by the prisoners who would soon fill them. A young female from the conquered world spoke directly to the assembly. Her voice trembled but did not break. "They killed my parents in front of me," she said. "They took my brother to the camps. I do not know if he is alive. I escaped only because a stranger hid me in his cargo ship. He died getting me out." She looked around the great chamber at the representatives of 43 species. "We asked for your help before the invasion. You said we were not members. You said it was not your concern. Now millions are dead. And millions more are slaves. Will you help us now, or will you find another reason to do nothing?" The chamber was silent. Several delegations would not meet her eyes. The Kessari representative studied his notes. The Threll ambassador looked at the ceiling. Then Ambassador Lowe stood up. She moved slowly, leaning on her cane. She was the oldest person in the chamber, and for a moment she looked every year of her age. But when she spoke, her voice carried to every corner of the room. "I will not lecture you on morality," she began. "You know what is right. You have always known. The question before us is not whether the Vreketh are wrong. The question is whether we will do anything about it." She paused, looking around at the assembled delegates. "My species is young. We have been members of this accord for only 30 years. But we are not new to these choices. We have faced them many times in our history. We have made the wrong choice more often than I like to admit." Kelveth leaned forward. He had never heard a species speak so openly about its own failures. "We have stood by while innocents suffered," Ambassador Lowe continued. "We have told ourselves it was not our problem. We have counted the cost and decided it was too high. And every time, we have regretted it. Every time, the cost of doing nothing was higher than the cost of action." She turned to face the refugee who had spoken. "I cannot promise you victory. I cannot promise that we will save everyone. But I can promise you this. Humanity will not stand by while your people suffer. Regardless of how this vote goes, we will act." The chamber erupted in noise. Delegates shouted questions and protests. How could humans act alone? Were they threatening to leave the accord? Did they understand the risks? Ambassador Lowe waited for silence. "We are not threatening anyone," she said calmly. "We are simply telling you what we will do. You may join us or not. That is your choice. But our choice is already made." The vote was held that afternoon. 29 species voted against intervention. 14 voted in favor. Humanity was among the 14. But it did not matter. The motion failed. Ambassador Lowe nodded once, as if she had expected nothing else. "Thank you for your time," she said to the assembly. "We will be leaving now. There is work to do." The human delegation rose and walked toward the exit. Kelveth watched them go. He saw Commander Bennett's straight back, Lieutenant Commander Ortiz's clenched jaw, the young officers whose faces showed no emotion. He also saw something else. As the humans passed the refugee delegation, Ambassador Lowe stopped. She took the young survivor's hands in her own and spoke quietly. Kelveth could not hear the words, but he saw the refugee's eyes fill with tears. Then the humans were gone. The chamber remained in chaos. Delegates argued about what had just happened. Some said the humans were fools. Some said they were brave. Some said they would fail and learn a hard lesson. Kelveth said nothing. He was too busy watching the door through which the humans had disappeared. He made a decision. He would follow them. He would see what happened next. Whatever it was, he knew it would be worth recording. Kelveth had expected the humans to take months to prepare for war. He was wrong. They took 3 days. He stood in the observation deck of the carrier Endurance and watched the impossible happen. Ships arrived from every corner of human space. Transports, carriers, frigates, destroyers, they came in waves, filling the staging area until the stars themselves seemed crowded. Commander Bennett stood beside him, answering his questions when she had time. She was very busy now. Everyone was. How is this possible? Kelveth asked. Your fleet was scattered across 47 systems. How did you gather so quickly? We called them, Bennett said simply. They came, but it was more than that. Kelveth learned that human reservists, soldiers who had left military service years ago, were reporting to duty without being asked. Civilian transport companies were volunteering their ships. Factories that made household goods were switching to military production. Hospitals were preparing for casualties that had not yet happened. It was as if the entire species had received a signal that Kelveth could not detect. He walked the corridors of the Endurance and saw the transformation firsthand. The casual, emotional creatures he had observed for weeks were gone. In their place were something else entirely. Young Maria Santos, the pilot who had wept for her grandmother, now spent 18 hours a day in the simulator. She ran combat programs until her hands shook, ate a quick meal, and ran them again. Her eyes had a distant look, focused on something Kelveth could not see. Are you not tired? He asked her. She looked at him as if the question made no sense. There are people waiting for us to save them, she said. I will rest when they are free. Lieutenant Commander Ortiz no longer smiled. He moved through the ship like a machine, checking systems, reviewing crew readiness, solving problems before they became crises. When Kelveth asked about his change in demeanor, Ortiz just shook his head. This is who we are when we need to be, he said. The jokes, the games, the fun. That is also who we are. But not now. Not for this. Kelveth found Master Sergeant Henderson in the armory, preparing weapons and equipment for the ground troops. The old soldier's scarred hands moved with practiced efficiency. You have fought before, Kelveth observed. Many times. 3 wars, Henderson confirmed. This will be my 4th, maybe my last. Why do you keep fighting? You have done enough. Surely no one would blame you for staying behind. Henderson stopped working and looked at the Sarathi with something like pity. Let me explain something, he said. When I was young, I asked an old veteran the same question. You know what he told me? He said, we fight because someone has to. Because if good people do nothing, evil wins. Because the universe does not care about justice. So we have to. He returned to his work. I did not understand him then, Henderson continued. I thought he was just talking. But I have seen things since then. I have seen what happens when people look away. When they tell themselves it is not their problem. His hands paused on a rifle. Those people in the Meridian sector. They are not my family. They are not my species. I have never met them and probably never will. But they are suffering, and I can do something about it. That is enough. That is all the reason I need. Kelveth recorded the conversation in his notes. But he did not fully understand it. The Sarathi did not think this way. They calculated costs and benefits. They made logical decisions. They did not sacrifice themselves for strangers. Later that day, he attended a ceremony in the main hangar. The entire crew of the Endurance gathered, along with representatives from a dozen other ships. Commander Bennett stood at the front, holding a data pad. Before we go, she said, We remember those who went before us. She began to read names. Thousands of names. Humans who had died in previous wars, previous battles, previous missions. The list stretched back centuries, to conflicts fought on Earth before humanity ever reached the stars. The crew stood in perfect silence. Some had tears on their faces. Others simply listened, heads bowed. The reading took over an hour. When it was done, Bennett looked up at her crew. "We do not know how many of us will come back," she said. "Some of us will not. That is the truth, and I will not hide it from you. The Vreketh are strong. They outnumber us. On paper, we should not be able to win." She paused. "But we are not fighting on paper. We are fighting for people who have no one else. We are fighting because the galaxy decided to look away, and we cannot. We are fighting because that is who we are." Her voice rose slightly. "I will not promise you victory. But I will promise you this. Whatever happens, we will make them know we were there. We will make them remember what humans do when innocents are threatened. And 100 years from now, when the children of the Meridian worlds learn about this war, they will know that when no one else would help, humanity came." The crew did not cheer. They did not shout or applaud. They simply stood, faces hard with determination. And Kelveth felt something he had never felt before. A chill ran through his body. A sense of witnessing something important. The fleet departed the next morning. 47 carriers, 300 support vessels, 2 million soldiers. It was not the largest fleet in the galaxy. It was not the most advanced, but as the ships jumped to hyperspace, one by one disappearing into the void, Kelveth understood something new. Numbers did not matter. Technology did not matter. What mattered was will. And these humans had more will than any species he had ever encountered. He transmitted his observations to the Sarathi collective with a note. "You should watch what happens next. I believe it will change everything." As the Endurance made its jump, Kelveth looked out at the stars, stretching into lines around him. Somewhere ahead, millions of people were suffering. They did not know help was coming, but it was. For the first time in his long life, Kelveth found himself hoping. He did not even know for what. He just hoped. The first battle was a disaster. Kelveth stood in the command center of the Endurance as the human fleet emerged from hyperspace into a wall of Vreketh warships. The enemy had been waiting for them. Intelligence had failed. What should have been a surprise attack became an ambush. Alarms screamed. The ship shook as weapons fire struck the hull. Commander Bennett shouted orders while damage reports flooded in from every section. "Carriers Valiant and Horizon are gone." An officer reported. "Columbia is crippled. We have lost contact with the destroyer screen." On the main display, Kelveth watched human ships die. 12 carriers destroyed in the first 10 minutes. Thousands of lives erased in flashes of light. The Vreketh were everything he had heard. Their ships were massive, covered in weapons that fired beams of concentrated plasma. They outnumbered the humans 3 to 1. They fought with cold efficiency, targeting engines and command centers with deadly precision. The human fleet scattered, regrouping behind a nearby moon. The Endurance limped to safety, with fires burning on 3 decks, and half its weapons destroyed. In the aftermath, Kelveth expected despair. He expected the humans to realize their mistake, to retreat, to accept that they had tried and failed. He was wrong. Commander Bennett gathered her surviving officers in a damaged conference room. Smoke still hung in the air. Blood stained the floor where wounded had been carried away. "Report," she said. Lieutenant Commander Ortiz's face was burned on one side, but his voice was steady. "We lost 30% of our fighters. Maria Santos is still flying. Her squadron took heavy casualties, but she brought back everyone she could." "Ground forces?" Bennett asked. Master Sergeant Henderson spoke up. His arm was in a sling. "Ready to deploy when you give the word." "We did not come this far to turn back." Bennett nodded. She looked around at her officers, at their injuries and exhaustion, at the determination in their eyes. "Then we adapt," she said. "We learn, and we attack again." Kelveth could not believe what he was hearing. You were nearly destroyed, he said. The Vreketh are too strong. Surely you must see that now. Bennett turned to him. There was no anger in her eyes, only something that might have been pity. The Sarathi would retreat, she said. It was not a question. Any rational species would retreat. Then it is fortunate, Bennett replied, that we are not entirely rational. The humans spent 2 days repairing what could be repaired and mourning what could not. They held brief ceremonies for the dead, speaking names and sharing memories. Then they planned their next attack. Kelveth learned that human military doctrine was different from other species. When the Sirathi faced a superior enemy, they withdrew and waited for better conditions. When humans faced a superior enemy, they found ways to make conditions better. The second battle was different. The humans did not attack the main Vreketh fleet. Instead, they struck supply lines and communication stations. They hit fast and retreated before the enemy could respond. They lost ships, but fewer than before. The third battle targeted Vreketh repair facilities. The fourth hit their fuel depots. Each attack was costly. Each attack taught the humans something new about their enemy. Weeks became months. Kelveth watched the war unfold from the Endurance, which somehow survived battle after battle despite damage that should have destroyed it. He watched Maria Santos fly mission after mission, her youthful face growing older with each flight. She lost friends. She lost her entire original squadron, but she kept flying, training new pilots, leading them into combat. He watched Lieutenant Commander Ortiz work himself to exhaustion, sleep for 2 hours, and return to work. The burns on his face scarred over. He never mentioned them. He watched Medical Officer Dr. Hannah Price perform surgery for 30 hours straight when casualties overwhelmed the medical bay. When she finally collapsed, her staff carried her to a bed. 4 hours later, she was back on her feet. He watched Master Sergeant Henderson lead ground assaults on occupied worlds, liberating prisoners from labor camps. The old soldier took wounds that would have killed a younger man. He kept fighting, and he watched Commander Bennett, who received casualty reports with a face that showed nothing, who made impossible decisions every day, who somehow held her crew together through horror after horror. How do you bear it? Kelveth asked her one night. When the ship was quiet between battles, Bennett was silent for a long moment. I do not, she admitted. Not really. Every death breaks something inside me. Every name on the list takes a piece of my soul. But I cannot let them see that. They need me to be strong. So I am strong. When this is over, if I survive, I will fall apart. But not now. Not while people are counting on me. The turning point came at Meridian Prime, the capital world of the largest conquered species. The Vreketh fleet guarded it heavily. Intelligence said the main slave camps were there, holding millions of prisoners. Admiral Patricia Cole, commanding from the carrier Resolution, called a meeting of all surviving ship captains. Her plan was insane. Kelveth said so directly. You want to fly directly into their formation, he said. You will lose half your remaining ships, probably more. Admiral Cole agreed. She was a small woman with gray eyes that had seen too much. But their command ship is in the center. If we destroy it, their fleet will lose coordination. It is our only chance. You will die. Some of us will. Perhaps all of us. Cole looked around at her captains. I am not ordering anyone to follow me. Volunteers only. Trengzis. Every captain volunteered. Every ship. The Battle of Meridian Prime lasted 6 hours. It was the most violent engagement Kelveth had ever witnessed. Human ships flew directly into Vreketh weapons fire, absorbing damage that tore them apart, advancing anyway. Carriers rammed enemy vessels when their weapons failed. Pilots flew suicide missions to clear paths for troop transports. The Resolution was destroyed halfway through the battle. Admiral Cole died with her ship, still giving orders as flames consumed the bridge. But her plan worked. The human fleet reached the Vreketh command ship. A boarding party led by Lieutenant Commander Ortiz fought through enemy soldiers and destroyed the vessel's command center from within. The Vreketh fleet fell into chaos. Without coordination, their numerical advantage meant nothing. Human ships picked them apart piece by piece. When it was over, the human fleet had lost 18 more carriers and over 300,000 soldiers. But Meridian Prime was free. The slave camps were liberated. Millions of prisoners emerged into sunlight for the first time in months. Kelveth stood beside Commander Bennett as she received the final casualty count. She read the numbers, then closed her eyes. "Get me the full list of names," she said quietly. "Every single one." That night, she read them aloud. It took 11 hours. She did not stop, did not rest, did not eat. She spoke every name clearly, honoring every death. When she finished, her voice was nearly gone. But she looked at Kelveth with something like peace. "Now they know," she whispered. "Now they will be remembered." Kelveth finally understood. The humans did not fight because they expected to win. They did not fight because the cost was acceptable. They fought because they could not do otherwise. Because looking away was worse than dying. It was irrational. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. And it was why the galaxy feared them. The war ended after 14 months. The Vraketh Dominion, broken and humiliated, signed an unconditional surrender aboard a human carrier. All conquered territories were returned. All prisoners were freed. The Dominion agreed to pay reparations for the next century. Kelveth watched the signing ceremony from a corner of the room. The Vraketh commander, a massive creature covered in armored scales, could not meet the eyes of the human admiral who accepted his surrender. "How?" the Vraketh asked. His translator rendered the word in a tone of genuine confusion. "We were stronger. We had more ships, more soldiers, better weapons. How did you defeat us?" Admiral Patricia Cole's replacement, a tired man named Benjamin Wright, considered the question. "You fought to conquer," he said finally. "We fought to free. There is a difference." The Vraketh did not understand. Kelveth was not sure he understood either. But he was beginning to. The human fleet began the long journey home. What remained of it? Of the 47 carriers that had departed human space, only 19 returned. Of the 2 million soldiers who had marched to war, barely 1 million came back. The Endurance was among the survivors, though she was more scar tissue than ship by now. Commander Bennett had been promoted to Admiral after the Battle of Meridian Prime. She walked with a limp now, a souvenir from a hull breach that had nearly killed her. Lieutenant Commander Ortiz had lost an eye. Maria Santos had lost her left hand, replaced with a prosthetic that she said worked even better than the original. Master Sergeant Henderson had finally retired, his body too damaged for further service. Dr. Hannah Price still served in the medical bay, though her hair had turned completely white during the war. She looked 20 years older than her actual age. They were all different now, quieter, slower to laugh, quick to remember. Kelveth returned to the Galactic Accord as the Sarathi representative. He had requested the position specifically. He wanted to see what would happen when humanity returned to galactic politics. The assembly chamber on Thessar Prime was full when the human delegation arrived. Ambassador Catherine Lowe walked at the front, still using her cane. Admiral Bennett followed, along with several officers who had survived the war. They looked tired. They looked old. They looked like they had left parts of themselves in the Meridian sector and would never get them back. But when they entered the chamber, something remarkable happened. The representatives of 43 species rose to their feet. Kelveth rose with them, though the Sarathi did not traditionally show such respect. Around him, species that had voted against intervention, species that had called humans fools, species that had predicted their defeat, all stood in silence as the human delegation walked to their seats. No one spoke. No one needed to. Ambassador Lowe took her place and looked around the chamber. Her eyes were bright with tears she did not let fall. "Thank you," she said simply, "for remembering." The session that followed was unlike any Kelveth had seen. Species that had ignored humanity for decades now sought their counsel. Delegations that had dismissed human concerns now listened with genuine attention. When Ambassador Lowe spoke, the chamber fell silent. Nothing had officially changed. Humans still controlled only 47 systems. Their technology was still merely adequate. Their military, after the losses of the war, was smaller than ever. But everything had changed. Kelveth finally understood why humanity commanded such respect across the stars. It was not their strength, or their technology, or their numbers. It was their choice. When the Meridian species were enslaved, every member of the Galactic Accord had faced a decision. They could risk everything to help strangers, or they could protect themselves and look away. 43 species had made calculations about cost and benefit. They had decided, logically, that intervention was too dangerous. Humanity had made a different choice. They had known the risks. They had counted the likely dead. They had understood that they might fail, that they might lose everything, that the galaxy might never thank them. And they had gone anyway. Because someone had to. Because looking away was not something they could live with. Because in the mathematics of the human heart, some things were worth any price. After the assembly session, Kelveth approached Admiral Bennett. He had spent over a year with these strange creatures. He had watched them laugh, and cry, and fight, and die. He had seen their weakness become strength, and their emotion become power. He wanted to express what he felt, but the Sarathi language had no words for it. He tried anyway. "I did not understand your species when I began my observations," he said. "I thought you were primitive, emotional, weak. I was wrong." Bennett smiled. It was the first real smile Kelveth had seen from her since before the war. "We are all of those things," she said. "Primitive, emotional, weak. We feel too much and think too little. We make decisions that make no logical sense. We love people we have never met and fight for causes that offer no reward." She looked out the window at the stars. "But that is also our greatest strength. We cannot turn off our hearts. We cannot pretend that suffering elsewhere does not matter. When we see injustice, something inside us demands action, regardless of the cost." She turned back to Kelveth. "It will probably destroy us someday. We will fight a war we cannot win, for people we cannot save, and we will die for nothing. But until that day, we will keep trying, because that is who we are." Kelveth considered this for a long moment. "I will ensure the galaxy remembers what you did," he said finally. "The Sarathi Collective will record your actions in our permanent archives. 1,000 years from now, when my descendants read about this war, they will know that humanity stood alone against tyranny, while others watched." Bennett reached out and took his 4-fingered hand in her 2-fingered one. The gesture was strange but somehow right. "We could not have done it without witnesses," she said quietly. "Someone had to remember. Someone had to tell the story. Thank you for being there." Kelveth returned to his ship that evening and began writing his final report. He wrote about human weakness that became strength. He wrote about emotions that fueled impossible courage. He wrote about a species that would not accept injustice, even when acceptance was the rational choice. He ended with a warning and a promise. "To all species of the Galactic Accord," he wrote, "do not mistake human kindness for weakness. Do not assume their laughter means they cannot fight. They are the most dangerous species in the galaxy, not because of what they can do, but because of what they will do. When human ships appear on your horizon, you face a choice. You can be the innocent they protect, or the tyrant they oppose. There is no middle ground. Choose wisely." And to the children of the Meridian worlds, to all those who were saved by human sacrifice, I offer this truth. When no one else would help, when the galaxy turned away, when hope seemed lost, humanity came. Remember them. Remember what they did. Remember why. And when your time comes to make the same choice, remember that once, a species of short-lived, emotional, irrational creatures looked at suffering strangers and said, "We cannot do nothing." That is humanity's legacy. That is their prestige among the stars. That is why, as humans march to war, empires tremble, and the oppressed dare to hope. The end.